We are here at IMF annual meeting, and we are joined by Felipe Larrain, Minister of Finance of Chile. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Minister, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for agreeing for the interview. I know that you're very busy. What's the main focus of yours while being here in DC?
Well, we've had a number of things here, a number of initiatives in the U.S. since we came. I stopped in New York and gave a talk at the Council of the Americas, and then had a luncheon with a lot of the members of the council. And then I went to Harvard. I gave a speech at the Harvard Kennedy School where I used to teach in the late 90s. And you know, there were about 150 students there and professors, and it was great. Then I had a dinner with Chilean students, about 50 Chilean students, what they call the Chilean dinner,
right.
A way to exchange views on the situation in Chile, but a more personal thing than just economics. Then on Wednesday we came to Washington, and I've had a pretty full agenda, including conferences yesterday at the University of Maryland and Georgetown University. We had on Wednesday the meeting of finance ministers of the Americas, including from Canada to Chile, including the U.S., where we met with Minister Jack Lew and all the other colleagues of the Americas, and then. Yesterday morning we had the Pacific Alliance, breakfast at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and then had the governors meeting at the IDB, the International Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank. So we've had a pretty full agenda, and expressing some of our concerns and doubts. And today we participated in the plenary session of the annual meetings, the bank and the fund. So I think it's there's a lot of interest, in what's happening here, and there is concern though from what's happening in the U.S.
Sure, but what about Latin America? I mean, during the crisis, Latin America weathered the shocks pretty well, but the growth is not as impressive as it used to be. Not only in Chile, but in the region in general.
Well, yes, but it all depends on how you look at it. Yes, the growth has slowed down. We always said that the economy would decelerate. We're facing a moderate deceleration. I stress moderate because the deceleration is not, something that we're going from 5.6% growth last year to 4.5. Well, this is a deceleration significantly lower than China's, from 9.5 to 7.5. That's over 2 points of deceleration. We had 1 point of deceleration in Chile. Though I would say that the important thing is that we keep moving ahead of the world economy. Because the benchmark, you should have a benchmark. As compared to what? Look at the IMF's just released the numbers, the projections for 2013, and lowered the estimate of world GDP growth from 3.2 to 2.9. So now the IMF is expecting the world to grow only 2.9%. The Chilean economy, we're expecting it to grow at 4.5%. So that's about 1.6%, or let's say 1.6 percentage points over the world economy. This is what's happened in Chile over the last 4 years. So I think it's important to mention, because it depends on where you're comparing. You should have a benchmark. If the world economy would be growing at 5, and we would be growing at 4.5, that's no big deal. A big deal is to be growing significantly more, not just a little bit more, than the world economy. We are seeing, though, some threats in the short term. The main threat and the most worrisome issue for the world economy is the U.S. fiscal problem, a fiscal stalemate, I would say, because even if there are some indications that an agreement will be reached, there has no agreement yet. This has 3 problems. First, the U.S. government shutdown. It is, and I will make this point because there are 3 different issues. The U.S. government shutdown has already started. Just to give you a hint, it's not only the inconvenience for people, who go for public services and can't get, they can't get the service because the U.S. office is shut. We don't have the figures, the labor figures for September, because the U.S. Department of Labor is not working. The labor statistics are not there, and they're not being released. So we only have the August numbers and not the September numbers, which should have been released. I'm not sure the October numbers are being surveyed, which is important, for us to have in due time. Why is this important? It's not only important for economists. This is a crucial element in the decision of the Fed to start QE tapering. You know, so I mean, we're talking about very essential figures which we don't see. Well, first, there's one thing, and the inefficiencies that this means for the economy, that are an important part of the economy, which is the government services, you know, which are intertwined with the public sector, are not working. The second issue is the debt ceiling. Hitting the debt ceiling. Hitting the debt ceiling means, and this will happen in less than a week from now, actually in 6 days, the US debt ceiling will be hit 16.7 trillion if we don't have an agreement before that. And then, by the end of the month, there's an interest payment due in the order of $6 billion. If this happens, you know, if you hit the debt ceiling, then you're in a problem. Because it means that because the US has a fiscal deficit of about 4% of GDP, you need to start cutting spending.
Sure.
At the end of this month, you have interest payments due on your debt, and then you also have to pay Social Security. What are you going to do? A US default would be a scenario, a completely catastrophic scenario for the world economy and for financial markets. And we know how a financial crisis can trigger a crisis in the real side of the economy.
And focusing on Chile, having said all that, and knowing that the US is one of the major trade partners for Chile, aren't you afraid that the country is overly exposed, the country's economy is overly exposed to the situations in the US, more than others?
Well, actually not. We are less exposed to the situations in the US for several reasons, but let me be precise. We are prepared to weather tapering, you know, and we have been weathering tapering since, you know, the start of the first open statements by President of the Fed, Bernanke, in May. And you have the fiscal, the exchange rate depreciating by about, 6%. We regarded it as a healthy depreciation of the exchange rate, not as a problem. And interest rates, which shot up here by about 100 basis points, pretty much didn't move in Chile, the long-term rates. So I think the country is in an extremely favorable condition to weather external shocks. But having said that, the second thing that we're weathering right now is the reduction in China's growth rate. China is our main trading partner, it's not the US. Actually, China absorbs about 23% of Chilean exports. So about a quarter
mainly commodities.
Mainly copper. Mainly copper. You know, probably about 90% is copper, but we're selling other products as well. So it's interesting. It's a huge market for us, and the deceleration is also a cause of interest, of concern to us. We are making our projections not based on a return to 9.5% growth or 9, but on 7 to 7.5% growth in China. But the most worrisome part for us is the financial consequences of a U.S. debt moratorium, which would happen for the first time in history. The U.S. has never defaulted on its debt, and if it happens, there would be a really nasty consequences. Because we have so many strengths in our economy, we have a very strong fiscal position. Just to mention, we have a gross debt to GDP slightly over 11%. Only 11%. Many countries have over 80, 100% of 11. But we have more assets than liabilities, so the public sector is a net creditor, not a net debtor. So that is a very important strength of our economy. We have, over the last 4 years, we've had our credit ratings, increased by every one of the major risk rating agencies: Fitch, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Dominion Bond Rating Service, DBRS, the Canadian one. In every year, we are able to raise money on the best terms of any emerging market in the world. You know, last year we went to the markets in October 2012, and we were able to raise over $1 billion, 10-year, mainly 10-year bonds, and those were raised on very favorable terms, 2.38% on 10 years on the nominal rate. So that was, we can't do better than that, and that means that we could raise money on extremely good terms, not the terms that we got last year, because that was very special. But I'm saying this because we have a lot of strengths. It's just that if everything goes bad and you have this fiscal crisis in the U.S. and the debt moratorium, the effects on financial markets, I mean, there is a limit to what we can bear, and of course we would be hit if that happens.
Now, Chilean economy is known for being stable in a continent that is not always that stable, but at the same time is known for one thing mostly, and it's copper, as you mentioned, Minister. Wouldn't you say that the economy is slightly too reliant on the copper? And if not, what else should be Chile should be known for?
Well,
In terms of sectors, not just
Chile should also be known for wine.
Great wine, yes.
Yeah, great wine, not only for copper.
Mm-hmm.
Great fruit, good salmon, excellent salmon from Chile. And among fresh fruit, well, apples, pears, blueberries. We are number one exporters or number two exporters in many of these products in the world.
Sure.
So I think this is a very important, very major thing. But I think that yes, we are heavily reliant on copper. Copper is about half of our exports. Exports are about $50 billion, and copper and closely related products, from refined copper are about 40 billion, close to 40 billion.
Mm-hmm.
First, we have been able to diversify away. If you look at the early 70s, Chile's exports, 75% were copper. Now it's 50%, but it's still heavily reliant on copper. I don't want to deny it. It's just that we have a broader basket of goods. We have been able to grow steadily. We are now at the verge of development, with this kind of export basket, which is very reliant on copper. We are getting less reliant in terms of government revenue because with the decline in the copper price and the increase in the costs, we are getting, mining revenues are about slightly over 10% of total revenues. They used to be a third of total revenues. Now they're about, slightly over 10%. So we had to put up with other sources of revenue, which are not from copper, and we have done that. What have we done? We did a tax reform, so we raised other sources of revenue. We reduced evasion, and we stimulated growth, and growth is a very important, a major driver of tax revenue. So we calculate that for every additional point of GDP growth, you get about $600 million in additional revenues, in additional tax revenue. That is very important in 1 year. So if we have been able to increase growth by about 2.5 percentage points from the previous government, on the first year you get 1.5 billion. On the second year you get 3 billion, then 4.5, and then 6 billion. And I'm not counting the compound effect. This is just simple arithmetic effect. So that gets you to about $14 billion in a 4-year period that you collect extra if the government is generating, if you're generating growth. So that is a very essential part of the thing. But I expect the Chilean economy to diversify over the medium to long term. It will be healthy. I think there are other products, services, and among them Chile is uniquely positioned to become an exporter of financial services.
Mm-hmm. So it's not only goods but also services that Chile.
Yes, it's not only goods, because I think Chile will never become an industrial power base, like a big exporter of capital goods, like other countries like Germany is. Mm-hmm. Chile will have, always strengths on this, with heavy natural resource, base, and, we will also have big strength on other issues like services. And I mentioned the financial services because we're starting to export financial services, among other types of services, the services, data management services, call centers and other things.
Servicing mostly your northern neighbors?
Yes, servicing yes, northern neighbors, and we're exporting engineering services, computing, IT services, regionally, and also to the US and beyond.
Minister, I know that your schedule is very busy,
Sure.
so I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up. Just one more question before you run for the rest of the meetings. In the past 2 years, the Argentinian business climate has changed significantly, and I think it's fair to say it changed for worse. Is Chile feeling the impact of that, either positive or negative? Positive in terms of investors choosing Chile, for example, Spanish investors choosing Chile over Argentina?
Well, let me say, Chile has a very long-standing policy that, for over I would say, for over 4 decades with a statute for foreign investors. Foreign investor that has not changed, on the major, the main part of that statute. We treat foreign investors in the same way we treat local investors. So basically, we never discriminate against a foreign investor. Our country is open. The foreign investors understand this. We have the best institutional, the rankings and institutional variables like rule of law, control of corruption, efficiency of government spending, and in terms of business climate, Chile has the best business climate in Latin America and one of the best in the emerging world. And I think this is people know that we are a serious country, that they can come in, that they're not going to get any nasty surprises as a foreign investor. I think that's a very important part for a foreign investor. That's why last year we had a record of $30 billion of foreign direct investment. In fact, as a share of GDP, we're by far the largest recipient of FDI in the region. And I think last year we even topped Brazil. On dollars, dollars, in spite of the fact that Brazil is an economy of, 7 times.
It's a continent on its own, right?
Yeah, so it's about 7 times the Chilean economy. But I mentioned this because I think that, of course, it's also an issue, I think, that you don't have to underestimate foreign investors. Foreign investors understand this. When foreign investors look, Chile is now in the Pacific Alliance. We're doing a very significant effort to integrate in the Pacific Alliance. And I think that if we do this, if we have, with very concrete measures of integration in trade, but not only in trade, financial markets, capital markets are being integrated. We have a common stock market right now, mercado integrado, totally integrated stock market with Peru, Colombia. Soon Mexico will join. When Mexico joins, Chile will be more than, Chile not, the Pacific Alliance will be larger than, as a stock market, than the Bovespa, than the Brazilian stock market. So I think investors understand this, and I think we provide a beacon of stability, a beacon of, a country that is considered as a serious country, and we have treated this in time with different governments. So I think this is what really a foreign investor wants, an opportunity, but it also wants some certainty. And you can be sure that we are going to continue to treat foreign investors this way because this is the way that it's proven to be successful. And, it's a way that, in a way, if somebody trusts you, you should, give back on that trust, and say, okay, you trusted me and you trusted well. And that attracts other people. So it's not only we do it because we think it's the appropriate thing to do. So independent of what happens in our neighborhood, we're going to keep this this policy. And I would mention finally that the 4 countries in the Pacific Alliance share very much these thoughts, these beliefs in terms of how to treat a foreign investor. And that's why I mentioned $30 billion. This is an all-time record for Chile. That's the materialized foreign investment in Chile last year.
Thank you so much. Best of luck for the remainder of the day.